Welcome everyone to Sci-ROI India's virtual launch event, an event designed to showcase the mission and diverse goals that Sci-ROI India has for enabling successful launch of early career STEM professionals in India. I'm Manali Ghosh, the lead coordinator of the Sci-ROI India launch event and the Global STEM Operations Director at Step Forward, a science nonprofit dedicated to promoting international science and technology exchange and the parent organization of Sci-ROI India. So what is Sci-ROI India and what do we stand for? Sci-ROI India, in short, for Science and Research Opportunities in India, is a dynamic and growing platform that facilitates successful launch of early career STEM professionals in India by offering mentorship opportunities, collaborative platforms, and scientific discourse. An early career professional is anyone who has finished their studies and training and is independently established in a STEM field. It was founded by Step Forward last year. It's the sister program of Sci-ROI Global that promotes and assists smooth transition of Indian STEM diaspora back to India. Our mission includes the following 4 specific areas: mentoring of returning Indian STEM diaspora, promoting networking and cross-sector collaborations, promoting and nurturing curiosity-driven young minds in India via undergraduate research mentorship, and scientific discourse. The Sci-ROI India team has been working to formulate and implement specific programs under these 4 areas, such as personalized mentorship programs for the Indian diaspora, cross-sector collaboration database for Indian STEM researchers, ideation hackathon and tech transfer programs to initiate and sustain collaborations, webinars on evolving trends in Indian STEM for scientific discourse, and research initiation and internship programs for Indian undergraduates from underrepresented institutes. So today and tomorrow, my fellow colleagues from the organizing committee and I will embark on this journey with you to discuss the diverse opportunities and challenges that early career professionals face in India and launch some of these programs that Sci-ROI India will be providing to them to enable their successful journey. Sci-ROI India's launch event, which we are inaugurating today, is being attended by many young Indian STEM professionals from all over the world who are aspiring to transition back to India, or have already transitioned, or have completed their studies in India and starting their independent careers. More than 25 Indian delegates from diverse sectors in academia, R&D institutes, industry, startups, and non-academic sectors will be providing their insights through multiple panel discussions, pre-recorded talks, and networking sessions in breakout rooms. All our sessions will focus on discussions around Sci-ROI India's major goals, providing mentorship, cross-sector collaborations, scientific discourse platforms to young STEM professionals in India, and enabling their journey through inspirational and success stories. Today, after the welcome address, we have a keynote address by a highly accomplished STEM professional, Dr. Harish Iyer, who has successfully transitioned himself to India and established as a stalwart in the field of Indian STEM. This is followed by a conversation with pioneers in Indian STEM who will share their experiences in setting up and managing labs and navigating through the STEM ecosystem in India. Our final session for tonight will be an impressive display of innovative and curiosity-driven science by early career STEM professionals from all over India and from diverse sectors. But we don't end it here. Come back tomorrow for an engaging session with the stalwarts in the field of Indian academia, industry, startup, and government R&D agencies to discuss how to start, fund, and sustain cross-sector collaborations. Then dive into learning more about the different funding opportunities for early career researchers in India in the next session with funding agency representatives and successful grant recipients. The grant recipients have already recorded some tips and strategies for successful grant writing in their pre-recorded presentations, which are provided in the program booklet you received and also on our website. We will also have a virtual coffee room at the end of the morning session tomorrow, where you can directly interact with the sciroi leadership team and ask any questions you might have for us. In the evening, we will continue our discussion on the topic of mentorship through live talks and discussion with successful Indian diaspora who have returned to India and established themselves. This will be followed by the final session of our event, where established educators in India will discuss the importance of undergraduate mentorship, both from the perspective of early career researchers and undergraduate students. This lineup of sessions would not have been possible without the dedicated efforts of the leadership team for the last 2 months. I feel immensely proud to introduce our team to all of you. Apart from the core team of WinStep Forward, we have the expertise of team members who have already established themselves successfully in India. As you can see here, they are from many institutes in India, and they help us in brainstorming about these programs and how we can sustain them. We also have members who have recently transitioned to India and who let us know about the current challenges and opportunities associated with that. Then we also have people who will be transitioning to India soon, as well as students, PhD students and postdocs who belong to the Indian diaspora but might make this transition sometime. But currently they are contributing to the Indian STEM economy by being in this leadership team. I would be amiss if I don't acknowledge our wonderful volunteers who are dedicated undergraduate, PhD and postdoctoral trainees who have created the magnificent flyers and helped us outreach all across the world. Thank you. If you think sciroi India platform and its programs will be beneficial for you, please visit our website and become our member today. You can also search for us on the various social media platforms on which we are available. Feel free to write to our official email ID if you have any inquiries as well. Before we start the proceedings for today, just a very few Zoom webinar etiquettes. You can have your view set to the side-by-side mode, so you can see both the panelist as well as the shared screen. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box, and please direct all your questions in the Q&A box from where our moderators will be taking them and asking the panelists. With this, without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Asim Ansari, who is the founder of WinStep Forward and the chair, Chemical Biology and Therapeutics at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, to deliver the welcome address. Along with being an expert in his field of research, that is transcription-targeted therapeutics, Asim has been a visionary in terms of creating and sustaining research training and educational programs that benefit students and STEM professionals across the world. After obtaining his PhD at Northwestern University and his postdoctoral training at Harvard and MIT, he started his independent career at University of Wisconsin-Madison, where he co-founded the prestigious Khurana Scholar Exchange Program in 2007, the SNBOS program and the WinStep Forward organization in 2013, and the sciroi Global, which is a program of WinStep Forward and the sister program of sciroi India in 2015. And now I invite Asim to tell you more about what led him to establish sciroi India. So all yours, Asim.
And Ali, I might just start to believe all the things that you say about me. Thank you very much for this very kind introduction. What helped me establish, or what motivated me to establish, was, I think, one of your organizers, Shriram, came to me and asked me about if we had something like the Khurana program for people who are just finishing their PhD and looking for positions in India. And so while we were discussing that year's cycle of Khurana, both applicants and where we were going to place them and do the orientation, Shriram joined those meetings and helped chart out what now has become Sci-ROI. And we debated a lot what the name should be. And one thing that stuck with me when we were starting the Khurana program, and Devesh is in the very first batches of Khurana scholars, and you can see he's come back, was now a very prominent director of an IIT. At that time, he was the dean, saying to me, these kids will never come back. We are investing in water, in air, they're not coming back. And so we decided to name it Science Research and Technology Opportunities in India. So the name was a little cumbersome, Sci-Tech Research Opportunities in India, but it was also, when you abbreviated it, a play on the word on return on investment, ROI. If the government of India has invested in us, all of us, myself included, in our education by highly subsidizing high quality education in most places in India, we can return that investment. We are the return on that investment. And we can help the sciroi, science and technology ecosystem in India from a distance and more effectively by returning and trying to build our careers there. And so Devesh was one of the first ones who went back, Shriram went back, and working with them and volunteers like Cheyenne and Piyush and now Manali, right? We started to bring together postdoctoral fellows and entrepreneurially inclined individuals and try to motivate them to explore paths to connecting with India. And this happened in 2015 at the consulate. And from there, the groundswell of interest led us to now do it in a recurring way. Every time we did an orientation, we did a Sci-ROI program, orientation for the Khurana program. And from there, very quickly, Sci-ROI grew very much in new aspects. The organization was powered entirely by volunteers. This is what it is. And their ideas, their direction is how Sci-ROI has continued to grow and respond to the needs as they emerge. It is not a static organization where we only do this one thing, an orientation at the University of Chicago in September every year. No. As you can see, if you follow the trajectory, many things have come out of it. Many things have been taken back that stopped being relevant, right? And as COVID hit, new platforms took off, new programs were then possible because people didn't have to travel and they could access this information. And we all learned how to use this information effectively, meaning how do you get information virtually without having to be there in person and make it count as best we can. And in that transition from going to a meeting, in-person meeting at Chicago in September to what it is today, what you're experiencing right now, a significant portion of that has been Manali, organizing all these things and working with the volunteer team, the names that you saw, and bringing many ideas to life. And many of the volunteers who are here had a complaint to begin with, saying, why isn't this being done? Why isn't that being done? And I urge you, those of you who are attending, if you see that there are gaps or some aspect that has not been addressed, complain about it for sure, but then come to us, come to this volunteer team, this outstanding team of people who brought this program to you today, and offer solutions, and more importantly, offer your time. Try to address the gap that is there, build that particular aspect of it. And this is how Sci-ROI India came about. We had been promoting opportunities in India, and people took us up on that promotion, if you will, went back and started careers. And it was, I think, 3 years ago, I was visiting one of these colleagues in Punjab, actually, and he laid out all the challenges that he was facing. And then as I went to different parts of India for various conferences, meetings, etc., I heard some recurring themes, some unique themes. And when I came back, we discussed what needs to be done with the teams, with the individuals in India. And that's where Sci-ROI India was born. So Navida here had been step forward. Manali then as a volunteer of Sci-ROI, and several others, Piyush included. We started to put together what became Sci-ROI India, a focus on people whom we encourage to go back and those who have gone back, to try and bring them together as a community, try to find common problems that they face, systemic problems, and then engage them with policymakers in India who can do something about those problems, as well as give them a support network to be able to become agents of change. Right? We can say all we want on this end, but it is people like you who are in India trying to build a career, or those of you who are considering a career in India, right, that are truly going to bring about change. And the way you bring about change is encountering the problems that you're going to encounter when you go back to India. And every institution is a unique challenge in its own right. There are common systemic problems, there are unique local problems. And what we can do is we can, through this platform, identify them, identify implementable solutions, identify long-term solutions, and engage all the stakeholders in allowing you to make the change that you have already started by going to India. So I'm really excited. I mean, we've had people come here and present grand visions of what India is going to be. We have you who have taken them up on that promise, gone back and have started to engage on the ground. And now it is our responsibility, we feel, those of us who are here in Sci-ROI, Win Step Forward, etc., to ensure that your efforts amplify and indeed bring about the change that was promised to you. And with that, I will stop and thank all the volunteers for making this event possible, for getting Sci-ROI India, making it a reality. This is the beginning of Sci-ROI India. You guys have been there all along, of course. And you don't have to be someone who encountered Sci-ROI in Chicago and that is why they went back. If you have friends who have gone back to India and started their careers, no matter what discipline. So we distinguish ourselves from a couple other organizations that are there in India already. There are sister organizations, we work with them, but we distinguish ourselves in the sense that it is for all disciplines and academia and non-academia, people with STEM professionals and entrepreneurs that have taken on the challenge of going back to India, taken on the responsibility of changing the ecosystem and making it a STEM center, if you will. So this is what Sci-ROI India is, and it'll grow and it'll evolve based on your vision, the volunteers' vision, participants' vision, and advice that we get and the solutions we choose to push forward with your guidance. With that, thank you once again. Thanks to all the volunteers, Manali, and my colleagues at WinStep. It's an honor to be here with you guys.
Thank you so much, Asim, for all the insightful advice. With that, we would move on to our keynote address. So we have with us today Dr. Harish Iyer, who is the India country lead, Health R&D and Deputy Director of Digital and Health Innovations at Bill Melinda Gates Foundation. He's a strategic partner between Indian researchers, global partners, and the Foundation's global health team in critical R&D work, including vaccine preventable diseases, understanding causes of childhood mortality, new approaches to treating neglected diseases, and life science partnerships. After getting his education in the US and then working there for some time, Dr. Iyer returned to India and contributed significantly to Indian STEM. Prior to his role at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, he was the CEO of Shanta Biotech from 2011 to 2015. He has also worked in various R&D roles in several biotech companies, including as the head of R&D at Biocon and in various technical roles at Biogen, IDEC, and Genentech. During his keynote session, listen to his inspiring story of transition from abroad to India and his significant contributions in the field of public health and economic development in India. Thank you, Dr. Iyer, for joining us today. The stage is all yours now.
Thank you very much, Manali, for that lovely introduction. One of the challenges, I just realized that I gave you a photograph that's 10 years old and I might look a little bit different from that. But hopefully you can hear me. So I, like many folks, I did my undergraduate degree from IIT in India, went off to the US, very happy, very excited and very happy. I think the main thing that made me think about coming back to India, there are two key things, maybe 2 or 3 things that are very, very important to me. One was, this was in the late 1990s, where when I started my first job out of my PhD was working at Genentech. It was like a dream job for me, very well-known biotech, pioneer in biotech. Everybody had great respect for me. Any conferences I went to was fantastic to be there. But I think I did not really hear the word India in any of my business meetings, right? It was mostly bundled under what used to be called ROW, rest of the world. And it was Europe, US, Japan, and ROW, if you remember, for business, most businesses at that time. And at that time, I kept thinking I was developing a lot of therapies for helping to develop, along with much broader teams, therapies for cancer, autoimmune disease, all kinds of diabetic retinopathy, neuropathy, lots of different things. And I kept thinking that, are these affordable to my fellow citizens in India? Their therapies are often quite expensive. And I would ask myself all the time, the taxpayer of India has paid for my education in India. I got basically almost a free education at IIT at that time. Roughly, I think 500 rupees per semester. I think it's a bit more now, but at that time it was 500 rupees a semester tuition fees. So I always used to feel, how can I contribute? What can I do? Where can my knowledge be useful? I very much believe that science and technology are critical for progress, although that is not enough, obviously. And that made me really think about coming back to India. I had just started to hear, during my undergraduate degree, I had heard quite a bit about Biocon and Kiran Mazumdar, and I never visited her or met her. I had quite a bit about her. I'd also heard about Shanta Biotech. It's kind of interesting that I went and worked at these two companies. I'd heard about Shanta Biotech and Varaprasad Reddy and the ability to make hepatitis B vaccine for the first time. Again, this is all the theoretical knowledge I used to be reading about. And then the other factor that drove a lot of it was, of course, wanting to be close to home, and how one could be close to family. So those were the two major driving factors for me. And luckily, my partner, my wife at that time, supported my desire to move, and she also willingly moved in the middle of a PhD program. And so I came back to Bangalore, and I want to make it clear that at that time, this was in 2001, with a huge cut in salary, like roughly 10x, I would say, at least in actual terms, in terms of cut in salary. Much smaller group. I didn't have anybody working for me. I was running a fairly largish group and lab in the US. Basically no group, individual contributor. But I think I kept a very, I don't know how I did it, but at that time I kept a very positive attitude, because I was so keen that I come back and do something and make a difference. So I was very lucky that I landed in a position where Biocon was looking for somebody interested in doing recombinant biologics. They'd not really done much before that. They'd mostly worked on small molecules and pharmaceuticals. And my expertise was very much in biologicals, large-scale bioprocessing, antibody work, purification of antibodies, INDs, and all kinds of aspects of antibodies, basically, that I was very involved in. And it was really good timing, I must say. I was prepared for anything, to be honest with you, when I came back. So I would not say it was some great strategic move where I thought through 10 steps ahead. I did come back. I was excited to be, and from day one, I was quite excited to be India, despite many challenges. And I want to be honest about it, right? This is, again, a personal story, and you should take what you want out of the story. Certainly many challenges, obviously, coming back to Bangalore, going to work. Obviously, I had a lot of free hand in deciding what I wanted to do, but timelines were often very aggressive, very tough in terms of what we wanted to deliver, very little knowledge. So a lot of things that you learn from first principles. And it took several, and so the first products that I worked on and sort of led on, if you will, were the insurance portfolio that Biocon had just started on. And very, very exciting time, despite the, relatively, I would say, pay was okay. Working hours were long, difficult working hours, often spending overnight in the lab. But the excitement of putting together a project like this, that I would, over time, of course, I recruited a team. I had, over the first 5 years, we started organically sort of coming together as a team. And the excitement of putting together a project, and I would tell my team, hey, folks, you have to think of this like ISRO shooting off a rocket into space or a mission to Mars at a low cost, right? We have to think about it like this. It can have a huge impact on our world, and certainly, luckily for me, Kiran and many of the management folks shared very similar visions what we needed to do, and so it was and I managed to get a team around me of absolutely wonderful people, many of them with experience all around the world. That was the other amazing thing. I also want to say that another very interesting aspect is when I came back to India, I just assumed that I would not travel. For whatever reason, it was a very strange thought of belief. I assumed that when I lived in the US, I thought I traveled somewhat around the world. I traveled to Europe and other parts. I'm never going to really travel when I come back to India. But I couldn't have been more wrong. And this is all very normal for people these days. But I actually traveled a lot in trying to set up new collaborations, new technology, meeting new partners, going to countries that I would never have imagined going to, right? This is going to China, going to Cuba, going to Europe, France, looking at vendors, looking at completely new technology. And it was kind of astonishing that often there were technologies we never ever used, and the company was willing to back the decision of a very small number of people to say, okay, let's go do this. The other thing that very much excited me was the entrepreneurial culture when I came back to India. Often there was not large committee meetings to make decisions on investment. I mean, very quick decisions, few people got together and say, okay, we need to do this, we did it, right? Again, very high capex investments often happened very quickly without committee, decision by committee necessarily. You can argue whether this is good or bad, but I thought it was the most exciting thing. It was a big difference from what I had experienced outside. So I think when I came back with these expectations, but this is what was very exciting, right? In a few years after I joined, we managed to launch insulin, and believe it or not, there was nobody actually making insulin in India. Most of the insulin in India, it was always a surprise to me, was actually imported insulin, right? And this is a very important drug. Even though India has got a huge burden of infectious disease, it has actually a huge burden of non-communicable disease, and diabetes is one of the most important one, which also leads to cardiovascular disease. To reduce the cost of insulin to significantly below what it was a tremendously exciting achievement for us. I mean, the real contribution, setting up a factory, developing the process from scratch with scientific colleagues, very smart people that I had, which I gave me a great deal of confidence that, wow, what talent we have, right? What capabilities, what can we not do if we set our minds to it? So I, over time, of course, I became the head of R&D after approximately the first 5 years or so at Biocon. I started as a bench level scientist, went up quite fast. I mean, maybe it's really nice timing, I would say. And then we started working on antibodies as well, right? And also novel antibodies. That was the most interesting thing, right? We were looking at novel pathways, novel biological pathways to interrupt autoimmune disease, the anti-CD6 program, for example, that we worked on. We also looked at oral insulin, very exciting opportunities to go even present at global conferences. And often in many of those conferences, I would be the only Asian, you can say, on stage, not even Indian, only Asian on stage, right? And speaking to a whole group of leading endocrinologists, diabetologists, taking me seriously and actually asking me quite serious questions about things that all of which I learned over the course of development, drug development and biologics development. So I think it was a tremendously exciting experience. And at the end of around 10 years at Biocon, I think things were going very well. And as you know, since then, many of these programs that I talk about now were all approved by even the US FDA and Europe, and the whole attitude towards India changed over time. The sort of recognition slowly that it's a big market. I would say, so around the 10-year mark, I started to think about what I want to do next. It seemed to me that I was very interested in prevention of disease and public health and sort of vaccines, the vaccines world. And around that time, I got a call from Sanofi, who was the sort of major shareholder in Shanta, asking if I would be interested in joining them. And I told them, look, I don't have any vaccine experience. I'm a technical person, but I don't have any vaccine experience. But they were still very keen to bring in. And this was something I was very interested in. This was like a godsend opportunity in some ways, right? because I was keen to see what can I do in the developing world. The reason I came back to India was to work in the developing world, to see how I can contribute to health. And the main thing about Shanta was that we were looking at infectious diseases, again, predominantly looking at products for the developing world, low and middle income countries, childhood disease, infant mortality, trying to reduce infant mortality with many of the vaccines that they're basically their pediatric vaccines they were working on. And there was this iconic company. I had met the founder, Dr. Varaprasad Reddy, who was an amazingly inspiring person, very down to earth, very committed, very, truly an inspiring figure to me, even to this day. So I decided to take the job. And again, this was quite a remarkable experience, right? Again, you keep thinking scientifically, am I losing out? Am I not getting things? But we did many things that were the first. New pentavalent combination vaccine, we were one of the first people to do in the world, with all the vaccine majors being around. Even then, we were one of the first people to do that. Shanta was the first company to do a recombinant DNA product with the hepatitis B vaccine, which dramatically lowered the cost of hepatitis B vaccines in the world. All right. I worked on oral cholera vaccine. Now, one would think, well, is cholera really a disease? But the interest at the WHO was huge. And I remember one of the consignments going to Haiti, where there was a huge cholera outbreak, and the UN secretary, I think it was the UN or WHO DG, handing over a shipment from Shanta to the health minister of Haiti. Now, think about the impact that has, just seeing that photograph has on people who believe science and technology is important, and having this, tremendous impact. Also generating collaborations on new products, new technology, really focused on how do we make this accessible to the poor. So tremendous experience. Around 4 years into this job, I did get a call from the Gates Foundation, and I won't go into the whole story because we're almost out of time. Great deal of interest in seeing, how can I help and support some of that work in terms of a broader canvas, if you will, a palette to sort of draw on. A very exciting time. And so here I am. I joined this place in 2015. Have since had the opportunity to work on many vaccines, and beyond vaccines, also many important drugs, including for COVID, where supporting India to be able to get fully vaccinated with the key companies. We work closely with Serum Institute, BioE, Bharat Biotech, for example, on much of this work. And potentially this could be the vaccine for other parts of the world as well. These are many of these vaccines. And then looking at other diseases, looking at molnupiravir, many of these new drugs that have come out against the COVID virus as well. And then now trying to look at additional areas of interest, including diagnostics devices. Diagnostics are going to be important, multiplex assays for diagnosing disease well. And equally on the digital side, which is less scientific R&D, but more technological R&D, looking at how can we, like India leapfrogged the telephone revolution with the cell phone, the landline revolution with cell phone. Can we think of interesting and clever ways to leapfrog on the health front as well on some of this? So this is and equally, it's a not as well defined space, I would say, diagnostics and devices. How do we make sure that we can contribute to this and be in this area what India has been in pharma generics, in vaccines, and to some extent in biologics? How can we be that in this space? So I think there are tremendous opportunities to contribute for science and tech, people interested in science and technology in the development of a country. I think it's a real privilege and honor to be able to participate, despite the complexity of dealing with India. I still get, when I was in both my previous jobs, I would get constantly CVs from people working all over the world. Right? There was a flood of people interested in working. What can we do? Because many people believe, for me, I think the primary motivation has to be, what can I do? Right? What can I do that will make a difference? Because at the end of your career, you have to look back and say, hey, maybe I did make a difference here, or I did make a difference there. And it's not just earnings per share, right? There's an earnings per share kind of metric, which may be important, to make sure that something is sustainable, but equally, what did I have an impact on, and where did I make a difference? Would I have made it not? Would it have been different if I was not here? So I think that's got to be something that underlies and is a key principle that one has to think about. Maybe I'll stop here, Manali, if that's okay with you. I think I'm past my 20 minutes.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Dr. Iyer. I think some of the points you mentioned at the end, maybe we can, maybe if we can discuss a little bit further, because you had such a diverse and, you know, well illustrated career. So I just wanted to know a bit more about, like, you know, with the interaction you had with all these, you know, young researchers over the years. So what is that one, you know, piece of advice you would have, right, for someone who right now, like in this dynamic world, like if they would like to move back to India, what is that one thing that they should really do when they're starting their independent career?
I think come and, you know, meet. I mean, if any of them are coming back to India, go meet companies, talk to them, see what labs look like, see what kind of peers you're likely to have. So I think that's important to understand the work culture. Obviously, India, you know, people work very hard. There's no doubt that in comparison to certainly my life in the West, it was a lot more hard work. There's a lot of hard work. So be prepared for hard work. Be prepared also for the successes that come along. So I think this is something that would be great for people to have conversations and make up their own minds in terms of how their journey is likely to look. And I'm happy to, you know, be available for anybody who wants to talk about, you know, transitioning back to India at any point in time, and share whatever experiences that I've had. And if they're useful, I hope if they're useful, people can listen to them. Yeah.
Thank you. And you did talk about a lot of opportunities that you had all over the, you know, over the span of decades. But maybe if you would like to mention like one or two challenges you had, and, you know, how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, obvious challenges are, one, to some extent, one could say that, you know, work-life balance sometimes can be hard because there is a lot of, I mean, we have a lot to do in this country, right? So you will get completely sucked into work, and that could be sometimes a challenge depending on your own personal situation. I think that was my experience quite often. Again, I think the way, I mean, some of it is psychological, right? I mean, you can look at the glass half full, half empty. I think taking up meaningful work can really offset some of that. And you have to go back and tell yourself, what's the big picture here? Why are you doing what you're doing? And I think at least that was my psychological device to tell myself. I would also often do perhaps quite irrational things, trying to think back about where all our country has come from. And, you know, pre-independence, I would start to think about, you know, many people fought for rights that we enjoy today and freedoms we enjoy today, right? Many young people, many not so privileged people. I mean, I would look at all of us as people of great privilege to even have this debate, right? Many not so privileged people continue to toil in rather obscurity and difficulty for our country. So, I mean, I think it's a, you know, it's sort of a privileged question to even ask, am I enjoying myself? So I think that what we can do to make it a more receptive place for others to join and work together, what can we do? Certainly, there are many challenges. I'm not saying it is simple. I think there will be challenges. There are political challenges. I said work challenges. There may be political challenges sometimes. So you must find the courage to overcome some of that. I mean, what I told myself is what I just told you, which is that, you know, you have to do what many others have done before you for far less. But everybody will have to find their own reasoning for why they're willing to do this. But I can tell you there are lots of success stories now. Many people who worked with me over the years who came back are all doing very well in leading roles around the country. So I think that there is an inevitable progression there that should give people a lot of confidence.
Okay. So following that line, I think Abhijit Banik, he has asked, like, do you think pandemic will open up the doors to more effective transitions for Indian STEM in the next few years?
I mean, the pandemic, is a unique opportunity in terms of trying to use science and technology to overcome a health problem. I mean, there is more than science and technology to it, obviously science and technology. I'll give you a simple example. Today, I was visiting one of the leading labs in Hyderabad, and we were having discussions around mRNA vaccines. We're discussing how come India struggled to make an mRNA vaccine? What are the real challenges? How do we make this happen, right? It's a technology, in some ways, I feel we are almost locked. We seem to apparently have been locked out of, right? So there is an opportunity there. How can we contribute to making that happen? How can we, and this is not just for pandemic, right? The great example is for the pandemic, but there may be many other infectious diseases for which these kind of platforms are important. And somebody who comes now, this is a great opportunity. Same thing true for doing PCR or RAT tests, multiplex antigen assays in general for public health. Is the broader public health question, right? How can we be prepared? How can we contribute to the thinking in the country, the discussion in the country, in the scientific establishment, to make a difference? So I think if for people who think like this, yeah, I mean, that's the way I think. I'm sorry, I can only tell you how I think, right?
Yeah.
For people who think like these are opportunities for us to make a difference, right? And there is a clear science and technology component, right? How do I make many of these new technologies, a whole new chapter that's opened up? There may be other areas of interest, modeling, like disease modeling. India is still somewhat weak in disease modeling. I would say it can be better. New drug discovery. Very few antivirals have been discovered that have worked against COVID. Opportunities there for understanding, rational drug design. How do we bring together wide, disparate sets of people in, toxicologists, pharmacologists, clinicians, biochemists, molecular biologists to come together, create consortia to develop new drugs. So lots of opportunities for people who are driven, who are patient, who are persistent, as many of us are in India, and then make a difference, and then set the ground for where we want to move in the future. And when you have that, you will see a lot of role models for you, including Professor Khan, who's I think joined us. But but there are plenty of role models for us to look up to and learn from and see how we can also model our lives. So I think having good role models also is helpful in something like this pandemic.
Thank you, Dr. Iyer. In the interest of time, I think we will stop the session here, but we do have a lot more questions in the Q&A box, Dr. Iyer. So if you want to answer those, just by typing in your answers, that would be really helpful. But thank you so much for taking out time for us. You give us hope, that we can also one day establish our independent careers in India. And really appreciate your, taking out time for us. So thank you and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manali. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.